Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. My name is Fernando Arencibia Jr., and with me, as always, is the great researcher that is Jennifer Woolman. Hi, Jennifer. Say hi.
Hi.
Today, we wanted to break down this great Q2 South Florida land sales report that is put out by Chief Economist of the Miami Association of Realtors, Gay Cororaton, and it really is filled with a lot of great information that gives you a hint of how the first half of this year has been for land sales as compared to last year. And I think that there are some great pieces of data that are available here.
I agree, and I couldn't help but when I was reading this, I had music going through my head. I had This Land Is Your Land by Woody Guthrie. I had Take Me Home Country Roads by John Denver. Daddy Won't Sell the Farm by Montgomery Gentry. I had all these songs going through my head as I'm reading this. But
I love it. I think it's really interesting because, Gay does a great job of going from the macro to the micro and kind of break down some general information about the Tri-County area, looking at Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beaches, and then looking at each one of them independently and seeing where the differences are. And there are subtle and important differences. But I think overall, you're looking at $3.56 billion in land sales in the first half of 2025. That looks to be a 14 to a 15% increase year over year. That's about 2,440 parcels sold, which is again up 9% year over year. And again, highlighting a strong demand despite broader, housing sales softening. And, I know that for the last few months, all we've heard is about how starts have really stopped and slowed down dramatically for multifamily and for new development.
So we're demystifying. Yeah. So sure. Starts, he's referring to housing starts, which That's is right. The number of building permits for construction. So he's saying that all of that is down, which makes sense given the lack of single family home sales, the tightening of capital, the interest rates, etc. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to clarify
I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
And then what I want to say is, we're all, me, I love to connect the dots, and we always talk about connecting the dots. And I love this title that is on Gay's report because the title is South Florida Land Sales Surge, leading indicator of future real estate development. So as we know, real estate, like everything else in the economy, is pretty cyclical. And so this gives you an idea of these are usually big developers or developers of single-family homes or commercial real estate that they see. They're planning for the next wave in the cycle, right? Correct. So right now the cycle's low. They're planning for the next. And, we know that a lot of multifamily was overbuilt. For a while, these things, since they go in cycles, most people tend to build the majority of it at the height of the cycle when stuff gets delivered. Mm-hmm. So then it takes a while to absorb those single family homes and multifamily properties. But this is telling you that the people who do this for a living, the big money investors, they're betting on the next wave. And so that's very, very bullish for Florida, especially for Southeast Florida. And the median price per square foot has also double-digit paced. So the residential volume is the residential is 116 per square foot, up 16%. Commercial $85 a square foot, up 21%, and the industrial is up 52% at $64 a square foot.
Yeah, a couple of things to consider there. Number one, remember that this is an average of all three counties. So, think about this as almost like a starting point, but not really a number that you would quote necessarily in every county and for every parcel. Remember that land value is based on the highest and best use, which means that it's tied to the zoning, the density, the ability to build, what it is that you're able to build in that parcel of land. And so, like, for example, I know people that would never pay $64 for industrial land. They wouldn't want to pay more than $35. It depends on the location, the area, the zoning, and all of those stuff.
Yeah, that could be something that's good for live local, and land that isn't even entitled yet is going to be a lot less. And entitled just means if it doesn't have a zoning classification, somebody has to go, or it's agricultural, somebody has to go through the zoning process in order to get that land zoned for a particular use. So that obviously is going to be lower.
No, absolutely. And you see it in a little bit of the other pieces of information that are given regarding what people are paying for land, especially like if you look at Palm Beach County, which leads all in residential, those numbers are much higher than the 116 per square foot that is available. Really interesting to see the dynamic between the counties. The fact that Miami-Dade is leading in gains, and Palm Beach County, interestingly enough, has led in total land sales. So 1.8 billion of that 3.56 billion comes from land sales in Palm Beach County. However, that also shows a 20% decline year over year, which means that the first half of last year, the sales of, the total land value was 20% higher than it is today. Miami-Dade County came in second at 1.4, but saw the fastest growth at 148% higher than land sales, last year. And then Broward County had 348 million in sales, up modestly about 6%. So I always love how when you're looking at a report like this, you begin to see these nuances, because if you only read that Palm Beach County led in total land sales volume and you stop there, then, you miss out on where are the trends really happening, and so that's why it's very important when you're looking at statistics and economic metrics to always compare it to how is it year over year. And sometimes it's even great to see it over a 5-year period and stuff like that. Like to your point about this being a leading indicator, I think it's an important component of that. And then if you break it down further and you begin to see, well, what kind of parcels really have sold, what has traded, then that becomes, very important.
Agreed. And I think the fact that the Miami metro area rent growth was higher for the month of June than just about any other market in Sunbelt states. The multifamily asking rents rose 1.6%, so not a huge amount, but that is on top of it having been increasing overall. And then Port St. Lucie, which you and I have been talking about that area for a really long time, they rose 3.9%, and we've spoken before about what some of the economic drivers there are. But I wanted to highlight, just because earlier this month we did speak about what's going on in Homestead, and the city of Homestead actually led Miami-Dade in land sales volume, and the biggest purchaser there were Lennar, D.R. Horton, Milrose Property, and NBR Incorporated. They were the largest buyers. Yeah,
certainly led all in regards to land parcels sold. 450 land parcels sold in the first half of the year in Homestead. And again, it's something that, it's interesting because this is coming off, I think a couple of episodes ago, we covered Homestead and things that are happening there, which I think is significant for people to pay attention to. Another thing that I thought was interesting is that if you look at, this dynamic of residential versus commercial sales, the most residential land sales happen in Palm Beach County. But interestingly enough, 55% of all commercial and industrial land parcels sold in Miami-Dade County. So again, that speaks to the dynamic that, it's not only about housing starts, but it's also about the amenities that are going to be built to accommodate those, that future development, right? Because you're looking at the logistics side of things, but you're also looking at the retail side of things, the office side of things, all of those that are, important components of a neighborhood's, amenities.
And I think the land sales also kind of defy a lot of the background noise that we've been hearing. We know residential sales have stalled overall, but again, if you look at all of the different research, and there's a lot out there in terms of the inventory, single-family residences, condos, et cetera, is really, really high. But then if you look specifically at the residential sales, residential land sales in Miami-Dade County, the average, the median price per square foot rose to $124 a square foot, which is up 125%. So although there's a lot of inventory and pricing for homes might be coming down from asking prices, they're not going to crash. They're not going to bust. They're not, there is some pain in the older, non-stabilized condo market. But right now, if people are paying $124 a square foot for residential land sales, it's going to be hard to have pricing go down significantly on existing sales, especially if you take into account how long it takes to permit, the uncertainty of construction costs right now, et cetera.
But also consider that increasingly you hear more and more about these developments that have, really fortified by the Live Local Act. And so, I feel that there is still a lot of runway for the Live Local Act to have its effect on adding housing units to all three counties. And I think that year over year, what, and we've covered this before, what the Live Local Act support has been that, every year we have some new iterations or tweaks to it to make sure that it does what it's intended to do. And so I feel that part of this growth that we're seeing year over year has a lot to do with now I could take a commercial parcel and I can create something that has significant more density, and so there's opportunity there too.
But I want to get off because I don't want to oversell the Live Local Act, because it is increased density, and the reality is that what we're seeing in the market is that a lot of the Live Local construction that's being done is for renters, and a lot of people don't want to rent. They're being forced to rent because of the cost of home ownership. And so what I liked about this is that Lennar, D.R. Horton, Millrose, they're mostly single-family, townhome, lower density development, and they're not buying the Live Local type parcels. So I think that bodes really well for the future of home ownership. I don't know if they're doing these build-to-rent communities or what, and I know that a lot of these big residential builders have been hurt and have had to be really, really creative with financing options in order to sell their new construction. But the fact that they're continuing to buy that shows that there just seems to be a bottleneck in that residential chain, which has to do with the average American, not the investor, not the uber wealthy, who still in Miami-Dade, the majority of those sales are still all cash deals. So those buyers aren't affected by the financing, right? But the people that these builders build for are the most affected. So the fact that they're purchasing and betting on the future tells me that they're expecting it to ease up, and then kind of the floodgates open.
But consider that, most of those purchases are in Florida City and Homestead, where they're still getting a good price per square foot on land purchase. So it allows them to maintain that affordability and be able to build those single family, projects. Homes, But when you look at other parts of the county, I think some of those land sales are more attributed to the increase in density than what you're seeing in Homestead.
For sure.
No, I agree with you.
Specifically talking about where these guys are buying and building.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I agree with you, and I think it is a concern that, we don't want to become a renter nation. I mean, I certainly don't think that is the way to go, and I think we do need housing starts that are for sale and that people have a pathway to own their own property,
Agreed.
So, yeah, but it certainly, Gay makes this, argument that this is a signal, that this surge in land sales is a signal in confidence in the future of real estate development, and that we are, as a unit of land sales, it is outpacing home resale and other core asset class transactions in regards to volume and in regards to number of transactions. Again, it looks like there is an increase in appetite for ground up projects, which perhaps this is not a now thing. Maybe this is something that we will see more of over the course of the next 5 years, because there are still some obstacles to construction that, we've discussed in the past, the cost, labor, there's so many other factors, the cost of capital today, all of those things that are important to consider.
Agreed. So that just, we wanted to bring this up because it does show kind of a future glimpse of where people are moving, where people will be moving, and how cities and developers are getting ready for the next phase in the cycle.
I also like that, one of the things that we mentioned, I think it was in Q1, or maybe it was a Q1 where we mentioned that like some of the largest commercial real estate deals in the Tri-County area happen in Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
And then Fort Lauderdale saw the most land sales, 52 parcels in Broward County. So again, that's another area. Like Fort Lauderdale seems to be gaining momentum, and there's a lot going on there. I think when you dive into these things, you start to find these little nuggets that I think are important to consider when you're making your overall decision, or when you're creating your, as we talk, your thesis as an investor.
Right.
Because all things connect. So yeah, again, it's great. It's great for Miami to have its, chief economist, and somebody with the level of experience that Gay has, and to be able to put these things together. And what I love about these reports is that it gives us now the ability to, over the next 2, 3, 4 years, to look longitudinally, and have this historical information, readily available for us as practitioners.
Agreed. And we will have a copy or a link to this in our show notes. So Absolutely. Feel free to go visit the site and download. And anybody can access this information. You don't have to be a Miami realtor, though it's better if you are. Gives you a seat Absolutely. At the table for all sorts of fun stuff. But in the meantime, you can pull up a chair and join us at our table.
Absolutely. And we are always happy for you to join us at this table. Believe me, even though we are between two chairs, there are plenty of chairs for you guys to sit around. So again, thank you for joining us in this brief podcast. We just wanted to give you a glimpse of where we are on land sales here in South Florida. Please reach out to us if there's any topic or any important update that you are seeking information on. We would love to add it to our list of shows. We got some great interviews coming up that we're very excited about. We again appreciate your listening in.
Yep, as a teaser for those, we do have one coming up on entitlements, on entitling land. And we also have how to invest and get started investing as a limited partner with a big multifamily capital partner group.
I love it. Phenomenal. All right, guys, thank you again for joining us. Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.